I've come to the conclusion the problem with regulation and innovation is character. If one's innovative and one has the drive and determination to innovate, one does not become a regulator. If one wants a safe, secure life, one becomes a regulator. And I quote probably one of the greatest engineers of the 20th century, Barnes Wallis, developed the airframe for the R-100, Wellington bomber, bouncing bomb, the earthquake bombs, and then swing wing technology. After all, he went to his old school, Christ Hospital, said, "Everything I've achieved has been despite of the experts and not because of them."
It's an interesting challenge. I think, Hamish, you touched on this and how the regulatory environment and the policy environment just doesn't help and can't adapt to new technologies particularly effectively. Of course, the counter-argument is a lot of these standards that have been introduced were there to protect consumers from cowboy operators who were causing problems in the market, and that there is a need for some degree of regulatory and standard-based control.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the trouble that we're finding now in the heat market is you've seen the press about air source heat pumps and heat pumps not being installed properly and such like. So absolutely there's a need for some sort of regulation. What I felt it was more needed is that for companies to stand by the amount of heat they deliver. The trouble is you install a piece of technology which has got the certified, but really it's about how that technology is installed that governs how well it is used. Ground source heat pumps don't fail because there's something intrinsically wrong with the physics. They go wrong because they've been badly installed. And the installer can install it and walk away. And so there's no follow-through in ownership of the heat delivery. So I think there needs to be some tightening up on not just the technology, but really on how it's installed and is it delivering heat. So we do need some control on this, absolutely.
Frank, in your sector, picking up on the gentleman's point, do you see that policy environment moving swiftly enough, or is it a barrier, an inherent barrier to entrepreneurs?
If you bring any new product into the market, you have to educate the market. But in order to do that, you also need the support, especially in our sector, let's call it flood. You need the backing usually, or the endorsements of be it DEFRA or the Environment Agency. Since 2004, there's been a standard for products in the flood sector, which is PAS 118. But it's okay having a British standard and a rigorous testing regime for products, but as you said, they can be fitted by cowboys, and there's numerous times that's been the case. 2.5 years ago, we set up the first independent accredited training course to start training the sector. Actually, in October this year, it became a British standard. We still can't get endorsement from DEFRA, even though it's an independent British standard, because it was actually adopted and thought about by a commercial entity. To me, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Because what we're doing is protecting the market, which is a very new market and is open to cowboys.
So it's not necessarily policy and regulation that's the problem. It's the pace at which it's delivered. It's just it's lagging behind what's needed.
They need to engage with commercial companies. They definitely do, because they need to see that has to be a return. So as far as I'm concerned, the departments don't engage enough with supply chain. They don't.
Because what concerned me about the regulator is that I didn't feel that they could see that they were bleeding money while we were working through this. And so I didn't sense any engagement to up the game and to do things quicker, because they're not commercial entities, and all the time we're bleeding money while we're going through this process. I think it's right that we have them, but I wish they'd engage more with the commercial businesses who are spending money to go through these hoops.
Is this an area where, I don't want to get into the big picture politics of it too much, but where the austerity agenda starts to introduce risk for business? Because a lot of these agencies, they are pilloried as quangos. The Environment Agency has had its funding cut through the floor, and that surely impacts on their ability to work with you and reach out to you and actually try and build some better standards.
I'm more with this gentleman. I think we've got people who are essentially conservative there, and I'm not sure it's due. I don't sense that the guys are holding us up because they're feared of their jobs. I think it's because they're a regulator. Yeah. So I don't see the austerity impacting us in the testing regime.
I was just thinking about this, and surely there must be a role for seconding people in to support some of these things to go through more quickly, so that you do have the expertise within government. And if you were going to take something back to Rory Stewart, then surely the idea that it's not the innovation that's the problem, but the skills to be able to support the innovation to go through the necessary hoops, then perhaps some idea of seconding some of this business expertise into to the right part, whether it's the Environment Agency or BSI or whatever, is perhaps one of the ways to go forward.
It's a valuable comment. I think the problem with our technology is there is no test, so there is no proof that our technology works, only anecdotal evidence. And no regulations are written around what somebody says it's done to their system. So until we devise a test and are able to prove scientifically, in inverted commas, that what we do, we actually do, then I don't think that regulation will affect us directly. I think regulation affects our customers, and then we have a way of helping them meet those regulations. But again, it's how those regulations are perceived.
In defence of government, I suppose one of the arguments you hear when you do see secondments is this fear of corporate capture of governance, is that the government, that, you know, there should be a degree of separation. I actually agree with you. I think there should be much closer integration, but the counter argument is newspapers would write that story up as companies regulating themselves or companies policing themselves, and of course there would be that risk. It would have to be very well managed to make it work. I think the gentleman behind by the pillar had a question.
Thank you. I sympathise with the panel, certainly in terms of someone who represents an innovative technology. It's often very, very hard and extremely frustrating, and a very, very long cycle in terms to establish any form of regulatory recognition for your products. Predominantly, this obviously has a significant impact on your ability to raise capital. And obviously develop your products further, and so the frustration with that is most heartfelt in my sense. When I'm not promoting my technology, I run a sustainable design consultancy, and I work with developers, corporate occupiers, and large design consultancies in the UK and in Europe. One of the principal barriers, actually, to the integration, the more broader integration of new technologies, actually isn't necessarily down to pure regulation. It's down to the sort of convention of a very conservative design and construction industry. And I work tirelessly in trying to work towards a more integrated design process in contemporary design and delivery. And the key aspect of an integrated design process is to bring expertise and innovations to the earlier stage of the design and specification process. Sadly, the industry is far too reliant on doing what they did in the last job, and that in itself is cyclical in terms of a conventional design process. So the problem is both, yes, with the regulators and trying to conform on that sense, but also trying to conform and to educate the specifiers and the supply chain at the same time.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And getting a new building technology to market, which is changing the way houses are built and interfacing with the construction industry, it's all part of the getting a new technology to market. As well as a regulator, it's changing building behaviour. So absolutely, you're right.
The problem we have with contractors that we deal with is they've always dealt with a technology that they've always been comfortable with, and they're too frightened to take the leap of faith, if you like, into new technology and give it a go. It's only the small applications where you actually prove out your technology and then rely actually on your last customer to be your next salesperson. So yeah, it's a difficult one.
Frank, do you have any sort of hints on how to overcome this? Because for this whole sector, this is absolutely critical. We don't have very long, if you look at the environmental challenges we face, to deliver a very big technological transition, and that small c conservatism of the building sector, the infrastructure sector, that could mean we just roll out another wave of stuff that isn't fit for purpose. I mean, what are there 2 or 3 things that we can do that would maybe help sell it?
Truthfully, and I'd say it, we don't use grants. Don't wait for them, because what they do is slow the process down. You've got to get out there and do it. I actually think, be it through the EIC, businesses should get together, actually look at new technologies and actually invest in them businesses, actually give them the foot in the door, instead of waiting for government grants. You can't continue with innovation. You can't even start innovation. You've got to get the grant. We don't. We invest all our profits back into our company because it's the only way to do it. What we want to see is then, I'll just give you an example. We're only 7 years old. We started in 2007 trading. We work on every continent. We're designing some of the biggest contracts in Manhattan at the moment. We're working in the nuclear sector in France. We've done a project for the EA in Cockermouth, longest passive lengths of flood defence in the world. It's been used in Angra numerous times, even last Saturday. It's got zero operational cost. They just want to test it. Our system's been tested around the world in Angra and is 100% success rate. Yet every other system that they have in place in the UK has got a 60% failure rate. But they just want to see how it goes because, truthfully, there's no impact on them. What I want to see is a sector, be it the environmental sector, that actually pushes everything forward and actually pushes change, challenge them. They do need to be challenged.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we're the people who are pushing change. We're the ones who are adapting it. We need to run around and make sure that they are. They have a life expectancy of 4 years. We're in a sector that's going to be the fastest growing sector for the next generation, and we should push it. Not them, we should.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It really is a cultural challenge for the sector as a whole. Is that if you look at the model for fast transition of technology, it's the IT industry, and if they're one thing, it's assertive. You know, they really do push their products so aggressively and push their innovation so aggressively, and really do, you know, capture government in a way and force this stuff through.
Does the panel feel, I suppose, reassured hearing the Minister earlier actually seeking ideas from the industry to try to, I suppose, to embrace the Tory government's a very market-focused government, and it's going to be looking to the industry to really come up with those solutions. Does his words really fill you with confidence? And second, I suppose, Frank, you mentioned the international comparators. What are people doing in the US? What are people doing in France, which is bringing success in getting innovative ideas out there?
The UK is seen as an innovation hub. We're very, very good at coming up with new ideas or value engineering. You can't come up with a new idea every day, but we're very good at value engineering. And they see that, be it across the pond or in Europe, they come to the UK. And it's okay, Rory Stewart standing here and saying it, but you want to sit across the table and want to see results. I was at DEFRA 2 weeks ago, and they're looking for quick results now because they've got to apply 38% cuts. They want to be seen to be pushing British companies abroad for export. Do you know what? The savings can be made in the UK. Exports will come anyway. And truthfully, we don't need them because the world's coming to us. What we need them to do is turn around and endorse British innovation, and it will go out to the world quicker. It's simple. It's not rocket science. All they've got to do is not be afraid to talk to commercial entities, because at the end of the day, we support the economy, we grow it, they've got to work with us, we're not the enemy.
So was that not what he was saying at the podium just now?
No, because I thought what he was saying was actually quite encouraging of asking for innovations from asking for ideas. The challenge obviously is follow through, isn't it? What's he going to do about it and how is he going to support those new technologies? But I thought his stance to us, asking for ideas, I thought was very encouraging. But it's follow through, it's an important piece. And what concerns me in the renewable energy space is we're prepared to spend £35 billion on Hinkley Point, and yet there are technologies around today which could generate electricity cheaper than that. Why don't you fund those? And it's all about, he mentioned bang for buck. There's some things which don't square with don't square.
Can I just ask Matthew if take him up on his word, turn around and say, we'll have a table of 12, sit ready to speak to him next week and see what he says. There you go. Because I'll clear my diary, I'll sit there and see how quick he responds.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed his diary's clear. I think I promised this gentleman the final question. If you could just keep it brief, so that'd be great.
Can I just make a comment from the finances point of view? Because we're talking here about venture capital. venture capital in the renewable sector. The first question I'd ask is, will it work? And secondly, if it goes wrong, who's going to pick it up? Who can put it right? The fact is, in venture capital world, out of 10 deals, 4 will be a failure, 3 will struggle, and 3 will be a success. So the hit rate is not all that high. Hence, venture capital funding, it tends to be expensive. Furthermore, there's also the limitation on deals. They're not going to look at Diddy deals. They'll only look at deals of above a certain level. And finally, the venture capitalists will also take into account the optimism, always the optimism of the entrepreneur, who thinks perhaps his deal is going to be more profitable than perhaps in reality it's going to be. If you move into energy, then you're invariably, in renewable energy, you're going to have some form of subsidy. And we, unfortunately, in the UK, have a government machine which likes to micromanage. And we know best. We are the experts type approach to life. If you need subsidies, the question is, how do you structure the subsidies? Comment was made about how do they do it in the United States. There, the methodology is often not to provide a subsidy to production, but actually to provide tax credits at the end of the day. If you are successful, you get a benefit. That puts all the risk with the entrepreneur where it ought to be. An alternative approach would be the way the Chinese have done it for wind farms. They say that, look, for the first number of megawatt hours you produce, you get a subsidy. But after that, you have to fight with all the other sources of energy. As I say, these kind of ideas don't seem to cross the minds of those people in Whitehall. We are over-regulated and micromanaged, unfortunately.
Yes, and I think what the renewable industry is calling out for is stability. And if we knew what the regime was going to be, then we could plan for it. And I don't see a strategic look at the subsidy regime for the next 5 years. If they catastrophically change something in a few months, that throws the capital markets into paroxysms. I'd like for stability and a strategic look at the subsidy regime for the next 5 years. Then you could plan for it.
I think that's the plea from entrepreneurs everywhere, just a little bit of stability, a little bit of clear thinking over a longer than 5 year period, but 5 years is a minimum. And then people can develop products based on that. Thank you very much to our panel for their fascinating insights.